Welcome back to our JavaScript tutorial series. In this video, we'll dive deep into the world of variables, starting with the syntax for declaring variables using the var keyword. We'll discuss the introduction of let and const, explain block scope, and demonstrate the differences between them with clear examples. By the end of this tutorial, you'll have a comprehensive understanding of JavaScript variables, setting a solid foundation for your programming journey. Let's get started. In JavaScript, variables are used to store values that can be used and manipulated throughout your code. To declare a variable using the var keyword, simply type var followed by the variable name. To assign a value to the variable, use the equal signs followed by the value. You can declare multiple variables in a single line. Var x equals 5, y equals 10, z equals 15, separated by comma. The var keyword has been around since the early days of JavaScript. However, it has some quirks like function level scoping and hoisting, which can lead to unexpected behavior. To address these issues and improve the language, ES6 introduced two new ways to declare variables, let and const. So, let is similar to var. It allows you to declare a variable with a block scope. Unlike var, let variables are not hoisted, meaning they are only accessible after the point at which they are declared in the code. On the other hand, the const keyword is used to declare constant variables, which must be assigned a value when declared and cannot be changed later. Like let, const variables have a block. Here, I declared my let, and I gave it a value of a string, and I declared my const and gave it a value of false. So this is using different data types, which we will cover in the next video. So what is block scope anyway? Block scope refers to a variable's accessibility within a set of curly braces, like those used in loops, conditionals, and functions, which we will also get to in a bit later. Variables declared with let and const are only accessible within the block in which they are declared. In contrast, var variables have function level scoping, meaning they are accessible throughout the entire function, even if they're declared within a nested block. Let's take a look at an example to understand the differences in block scope between var, let, and const. So for this example, we have a function called example, and we are executing the function after we declare the function here. And what I did to bring up the console in the browser was go over to index.html. I hit Alt-LO to bring up live server. And I went to the console. So if you press F12 on your keyboard, the console will pop up. And here you will get this output. But if you don't want to do it this way, you can see the output here in the comments in any case. Now, we have declared a variable called var example outside of the scope of the if conditional. Inside of the if, we have declared let example, which I am let, const example, I am const. Now, if we print this console log to the screen, we will get the output, I am a var, I am a let, I am a const. This is how it should be, right? But if we try to print from outside of the scope of the if conditional, console.log var example, let example, and const example, the var example still works. However, let and const throw an error. They are not defined because they are relegated to inside of this if conditional. Now, if we move the var example inside of the if conditional and test it again, we see the exact same thing happens. var is still accessible outside of the block scope because it is a function scope or a global scope variable, whereas let and const still throws an error. Now, if we move let example and const example outside of the if statement's block scope, now everything works fine. We can actually print off I am a const, I am a let. Because now the console log is in the same scope as the variables themselves. So the changes to let and const were implemented to avoid var being accessible everywhere. This is very handy. So these restrictions in scope is a very handy way to code without having bugs in our code that is very hard to find. So here we are trying to reassign a value to my const, and it throws an error. This doesn't happen if we have a let value. If we were to say my let equals 20, that works perfectly fine. That works perfectly fine. It is only if we try to reassign the const value that we get an error. And that is great because sometimes we want a variable to maintain the same value and not be changed accidentally or otherwise. So as an additional example about that topic, let's take a look at var. So if we initialize var to a string, we can change the value, no problem, no error, but the initial value is overwritten. If we have let example let, right? If we redeclare the value, we get an error because let values cannot be redeclared. They can be changed, but not redeclared. So for example, if we remove the let, now the value changes, but there's no error. So in this example, there would be no error, but the initial value would be overwritten. Okay, and for const, the same thing applies. We cannot redeclare the const value. And additionally, we cannot change the value either. There will be an error. There will be an assignment to constant variable error. So these are very important distinctions between var, let, and const. As I said before, it's generally good practice to use let and const in modern JavaScript code to avoid potential issues caused by vars, function level scoping, and hoisting. In fact, I recommend to pretty much never use var. There may come specific circumstances where it could be handy, but in general, you can forget that var ever exists and just use let and const. So let's summarize what we learned so far. In this tutorial, we covered the basics of JavaScript variables, starting with the syntax for declaring variables using the var keyword. We then discussed the introduction of let and const, which were added to address some of the quirks associated with var. We explained the concept of block scope and demonstrated the differences between var, let, and const with clear examples. Now, by understanding these fundamental concepts, you've set a strong foundation for your JavaScript programming journey. We hope you found this tutorial helpful. We encourage you to practice using let and const to declare and manage variables in your code. Stay tuned for more in-depth JavaScript tutorials. Please hit like and subscribe, and happy coding. Let's watch the next video in our series.